Hello, Garland Nixon here, and let's talk a little bit about what's happening with the discussions between the U.S., the UK, and of course Ukraine, and regarding the uh, resolution of the conflict, and a couple of other things that I think are important. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here. All right, let's get going. The first thing, but before we even talk about that, there's something I want to touch base with you on, and that is the recent, we'll call it an admission of the Russians. Interesting. It's very interesting. If this is what it is, an admission that North Koreans were fighting in Kursk, right? So we got, let's see, let me find it. Oh, okay. Yes. So here's what's interesting. Let me share an article with you. Uh, okay. Not a single North Korean violated his oath. Pyongyang troops showed discipline, coordination, and disregard for death, contributing greatly to the defeat of the Ukrainian invaders. Russia had neither confirmed nor denied the presence of North Korean troops on the front line. Strictly speaking, we were not obligated to notify anyone about it. Okay. And it goes on to say they underwent training, mastering drone operation. And so then the combat bureaucrats, as our military jokingly and covertly called them, were transferred to the Kursk region. So a couple of things here. While in fact the Russians never admitted that there were North Koreans there, they kind of implied that there wasn't. In Russian media, it was like, oh, do you believe this foolishness? Oh, look at this. There's AI, so they a little misleading by saying that they didn't confirm or deny. They pretty much kind of implied that they weren't there, but they didn't come out and say they're not there. Now, that being said, that also leads me this. Being a former investigator, I'm always about timelines. Why now? Why would they say that now? What is the importance of it now? I think a couple of things. Number one, I'm still not convinced they were or weren't there. There's always a discussion about the West using propaganda, the West using misleading stories, the Washington Post making up stories, and New York Times about Russians, and 50 Russian generals were killed, and Putin has, 10 different types of cancer. Here's what I have to say. I think that the Russians do use some misdirection plays. I think they do use some propaganda of this nature. I don't think it's the same way that the West does it. I don't think they put out a bunch of stories to say, the Ukrainians are running out of missiles every other day, things like that. They may say, we've got 10 million Ukrainian troops surrounded here or there, where they don't. They may say, oh, well, we're not using North Korean troops where they are, or right now. They could just as be easily saying, yes, there was lots of North Korean troops there, but maybe there weren't, right? I'm still not convinced there were. I'm still not convinced that the Russians aren't playing, word games here, because the thing about it is this. While they say they were there was a lot of fighting. The Ukrainians said that they captured a couple of North Koreans, and they had like a couple of pictures of guys who were Russian Siberians. They had taken a couple of soldiers that they did this AI thing, and they changed the picture. So the Ukrainians never came up with any North Korean soldiers, pictures of North Korean soldiers, actual captured North Korean soldiers. So in the same way that basically the Russians are saying, well, okay, maybe they were there, but we didn't come out and say they weren't. They kind of really did. So in the same way that they were kind of doing misdirection plays saying that they weren't there, they could be misdirection plays saying that they are, for a number of reasons. So I'll put it to you like this. I don't take it that they were or weren't. Right now, the Russians are playing some misdirection propaganda. Yeah, they were there. No, they weren't. Maybe they were there. Maybe they come out in a month and say, okay, they weren't there, but that's warfare, right? That's a normal part of warfare. A normal part of warfare is to fake your enemy out. I do think it would make sense if they were to train North Korean soldiers to fight on the battles, to fight battles in warfare. And it wouldn't. One of the arguments I could make for saying they were there now is a show of unity, right? Right now, to say they were there is to imply something, right? Okay. And this is why I say it could be a propaganda move. It wouldn't shock me if it is, if they weren't there. What they could say is this: yeah, the North Koreans were here and they fought with us. Doesn't that imply that if somebody comes after the North Koreans, that the Russian soldiers are going to fight? It's a way of reiterating, it's a way of doubling down on the narrative that says the Russians and the North Koreans are one fighting force. They came and fought for us on our ground. We'll fight for them on their ground. It's a way of showing more unity and strength between the alliance. So I'm not convinced that they were and weren't there. I feel like it's obvious right now. One of these two things were propaganda to some level both. So I am not convinced that there were North Koreans there, or there weren't North Koreans there. I don't think we have a way of knowing. I think the Russians are playing some word games with us. And hey, that's the way, that's the game. You know what I mean? That's warfare. So, there's a wink and a nod going on somewhere here as to whether or not there were North Korean soldiers there. And that's the game that's being played. So, let's wait for the long term and see what happens. We do definitely see that the indication is the two countries will fight together. And in light of the reality that the U.S. empire is doing more threatening around the world and threatening Iran, it could also imply, hey, we're a unified bloc and we fight with our other members of the bloc. So could something be implied there from the Iranian-Russian alliance? It's possible. I'm just saying, it could be a propaganda move. I don't take it to be true or not true. It is what it is, right? All right, let's move. There are people who are like, no, the Russians only tell the absolute truth no matter what. It's war. Propaganda is a tool of war. Information is a tool of war. Don't be so, it's okay to support the Russians, to support the North Koreans, the Iranians, the Chinese, whoever it is, right? But don't think that whatever side you support is so pristine that they're not going to use the tools of conflict. Information is a tool of conflict. I just think the Russians use it differently. I think the Russians use it more sparingly. And I think that's something to understand about Russia. Here's the important part of that. Look, if you cry wolf all the time, nobody will believe you. If you're putting out articles that say the Russians are out of missiles every 3 months, if you're putting out articles that say the Russians are fighting with shovels every 3 months, the Russians are losing 10 million troops a day every 3 months, it gets to the point where it's monotonous. People are yawning after a while. So much so that even when you tell the truth, nobody believes you, right? When the Russians were about to invade and attack Ukraine, I didn't believe it. And want me to tell you one of the real reasons I didn't believe it, to be quite frank? Look, I got that one wrong, but why? Because the U.S. came out and said the Russians are about to attack. And back then I was like, well, that means they ain't. Why? Because the U.S. media and the U.S. government lied so much that I didn't believe anything they said. Now, they were telling the truth. And now I understand the reason they knew was because they increased the number of attacks by the Ukrainian troops on the Russian territories in Ukraine, right, to provoke an attack. So they knew they were going to attack because they deliberately provoked an attack. But I didn't believe it because they lie all the time. So my point being this: because the West tends to use propaganda as a tool of everyday life, after a while, you don't believe anything they say. I turn on the news, I believe nothing. I'm like, that's a lie, that's a lie, that's a lie. So I don't even turn on the news anymore. The newspaper, I open it, I look at not open it, but online, the Washington Post, New York Times, to see what the lie is going to be. I don't believe any of it. It's possible they're telling the truth sometime, but I never believe any of it, right? The Russians use it sparingly. which means you're going to hear them tell the truth, tell the truth, tell the truth. And when they slip when they slip a Mickey in on you, right? When they slip the occasional propaganda lie, you're going to think it's the truth, because most of the time they use it sparingly. They use it like salt in your stew. Too much salt and the stew is ruined. Excuse me. Just a little bit of salt makes the stew taste perfect. Although I don't put salt in my stew because, as an older guy, I'm like, I don't want high blood pressure. But that's a whole other story. You get my point. Now, let's continue. Let's talk about the so-called negotiations, right? Here's the way I view the negotiations at this point. I'll tell you how I view the negotiations. As a man who studies Zen, one of the discussions in Zen is, of course, what they now call mindfulness, be in the moment, right? That's the Zen people have been doing this forever, right? The Eastern religions have been preaching be in the now forever, but suddenly, the Americans and West has discovered mindfulness, stay in the present, be present. Oh boy, that's brand new. It's only thousands and thousands of years old in the Eastern philosophies, at any rate, and religions. But here's my point. One of the discussions is Alan Watts used to talk about this, dancing. You dance in the moment. If somebody's dancing, let's say you hear a really good song that you like, and I would call this dancing. You ever ride down the road and a song you like, or you have a CD, an old song or whatever, right, that you like, MP3, and you're listening to it, one of your favorite artists, and you're just riding down the road and your head's bobbing. You're like, dude, man, that's nice. And you just ride down the road. It's an old song from the 80s, Till Tuesday, Voices Carry, as an example, whatever, right? This is a song you like. Maybe you like jazz or blues, right? Taj Mahal, Fishing Blues. What a great blues song. I don't know if you like Taj Mahal, but what a great blues artist, right? I'm riding down the road. I'm listening to blues. Oh, I'm going fishing. Yes, I'm going fishing. And my baby's going fishing too, right? And I'm going fishing. And my baby's going fishing too. And you're just, oh man, blues is, I love blues. Anyway, here's my point. You're in the moment. You're not doing that because, well, gee, I can't wait till I get finished. I'm going somewhere. No, you're in the moment. You're enjoying that song right then. You're technically dancing because your head's bobbing, right? Here's my point. That's being present. That's being in the moment. You're doing it to do it, right? Why did I go through all of that crap? Because that's where we've gotten to with this so-called negotiations. And I think the Russians well understand this. And I think the Russians are the most comfortable with this. And to some extent, the UK, if we name the three parties, right? We got the Russians. And this is what it's gotten to, right? Things have broken up into three parties. You've got the Russians. You've got the US, UK. I'll call them the MI6 triumvirate, right? Which is MI6 is at the least, but you've got the UK, the French, and the Ukrainian puppets, right? But I call that the UK collective because I believe that the MI6 collective, because MI6 is at the front of it. MI6, they're the ones who put together the political entities in Kiev. They're the ones that control and support the political entities in Kiev. They're the ones who give Zelensky his talking points and amplify his talking points, and they're the ones who put everything together as far as the strategy. So they're the leaders of that particular faction, right? So you got the Russians, you got the MI6 faction, and then you got the Trump faction. However, add something to this: the MI6 faction also stretches into the U.S. So the MI6 faction is the neocon faction, which also includes the Democrats and a whole lot of the Republicans here in the US who are aligned with that. And it also stretches right into the Trump camp, because there you have Waltz, there you have Rubio, right? There you have Kellogg, right? So that MI6 faction is very powerful because it has its tentacles in, very, very deeply embedded into the U.S. Political, whatever you want to call it, into the U.S. Faction of politics, one of the factions of U.S. politics, the military-industrial complex, right? The Democrats completely, and the, say, Lindsey Graham part of the Republicans, and the Marco Rubios, the neocons in the Republican Party, and then of course all of the think tanks. So that MI6 faction is so powerful because it has the think tanks, it has the military industrial complex, it has the embedded people in the Trump camp, and it has the European and Ukrainian. So it's really, really powerful contingent. And then, of course, you have Trump, who probably, I think, has, no doubt, you've got Trump, who has Tulsi Gabbard, and he has the MAGA people. See, that's the thing, though. What Trump has is he has a very powerful group that are on the ground in the electorate. He has a very powerful group that is the anti-war people, which would be, the anti-war left, the anti-war right, the anti-war libertarian. So they're not in the halls of power, but when it comes to actually the people on the ground and the everyday people, they're supporting Trump. And believe it or not, in Europe, that's one of the issues that they have. The MI6 people have, the ruling elite in Europe that are in favor of this. One of the problems that they have is that overwhelmingly the people in Europe support some kind of a resolution, diplomatic resolution to this conflict. A friend of mine was in Greece a while back, and he said when he was in Greece, a lot of people, this was around the election and after the election, a lot of the people were for Trump in Greece, not because they aligned with him politically. There's a lot of socialists and leftists in Greece, but because they wanted an end to the conflict. And of course, the Greeks are, Orthodox Christians too. So there's a lot of people in Greece who align with the Russians, but you get my point. So there's a lot of people on the ground who want this thing resolved diplomatically, because let's face it, also their sons and daughters are going to be the ones that go to war, and they don't want that to happen. So there's various, but you got to understand the factions here, understand who's fighting against who. And what do we have now? At this point, we have a dance going on. We have a matter of the people who are negotiating, and they're negotiating to be negotiating. I think to some extent the Russians are doing that. I think the Russians know, look, Trump's not going to be able to push through something that we would accept, most likely. It's possible. Well, let me say this. I don't think it's possible. I think the Russians, because they are negotiators, and because they are diplomats, I think they are willing to make a deal to give, right? They're willing to give some things. And maybe people may not say, I don't think they should give anything, but they understand reality. They're realistic people. And I think they understand that, diplomacy, and in diplomacy, they know they got to give something they may not like, but there's certain things they got to have. And there's future considerations that they got to take into account, right? So the other part of it, and here's the future consideration also. Everybody thinks about this. Yes, well, the Ukrainians and the Europeans, they want to pause things so they can build up. Right. And they can build up. And well, first of all, here's the bottom line. They ain't got but so much to build up. Their military industrial complex is crap. And the US's military industrial complex is getting crapper because the Chinese have cut them off on a lot of, magnets that they need. But bottom line, a lot of material, a lot of resources that the military industrial complex in the United States needs to build missiles and planes and all kinds of things right now is cut off. So they're not going to be able to build up like they really need to build up. The UK, I mean the Europeans right now, they're poor, they're broke, their people are restive and unhappy. Their military industrial complex is weak. So even though they may want to build up in Ukraine, even that they're very weak, and they don't have a lot of stuff to build up because a lot of their stuff has already been blown up. So yes, while the Europeans would like to build up Ukraine, they don't necessarily have the material the material that they need to build up it so much. Also, let's not forget, the Russians' military industrial complex is humming along pretty well. So the truth be told, if there was a quote pause in the fighting and the two sides were able to build up, man, the Russians would really be able to build. Imagine if the Russians aren't firing any drones, any missiles, or anything. Just from the perspective, if both sides, if the Europeans are building up, The Americans are building up, but the Americans ain't building up to send it to Ukraine. They're building up, but part of the reason they're building up is because their stuff is getting used up faster in the Middle East. Their stuff is getting used up faster than they can rebuild it, and they're having problems because the Chinese cut them off. So I don't know how much they can build up anyway, but the Russians are humming. So if all sides are building up, the Russians are building up way more and way faster than anyone. So the armament build up, the Russians would win. I'm not saying that the Russians are going to accept that. I'm just saying from the perspective of if all sides were building up, look at whose military industrial complex is humming along and whose is either damn near non-existent in the UK, or who in the US, they're trying to be a world hegemon. So they're building up their military industrial power to fight everybody in the world, and they're running out of stuff. So if the US speeds up right now their military industrial complex, they crank up the volume and they make it go faster. The fact of the matter is this: they have a limited amount of rare earth minerals and magnets and things like that, and China ain't sending them no more. So all they're going to do is run out faster. They say, okay, let's start building. Well, guess what? At the rate they're going, 4, 5, 6 months from now, they can't build any missiles or anything because they're running out. And how do they reroute some new stuff? So that it would even be advantageous to the Russians if all sides were rebuilding. Not that the Russians, I'm not implying the Russians are going to accept anything. I'm just throwing out some various bits of information. Additionally, we get back to the negotiations. I think from the perspective also of the Russians, that while they negotiate, they continue to win battles. While they negotiate, they continue to take land. And if at some point they're going to come to some kind of an agreement, possession is 9/10 of the law, right? So if you're really, the truth is, if you're negotiating, your strength is negotiating for what you have, saying, I ain't giving back what I already have. It's much tougher to negotiate to say, we have these areas and we've already laid a claim to these other areas that the Ukrainians have, so they have to vacate areas that they already have. That's a tough sell. That's a tough negotiation to say, we've got 10 cities. We lay claim to 14 cities. So we're going to keep the 10 that we have, and those other 4, the Ukrainians have to abandon those and give them to us. That's a tough. I'm not saying that the Russians can't do that or make that argument. Sure, they can. I'm just saying, as far as diplomacy, that's a tough one to get. Everybody around there is going to negotiate, but in the end, they're going to say, okay, we got this deal, that deal, this deal. The things that you have, you can keep, but you can't lay claim on the things that you don't have yet. And how do you get that in a negotiation? I don't think the Ukrainians, you'll be able to get them to abandon stuff they don't have. So my point being, why do I say all that? I say all that to say this. If there is a diplomatic relations solution, which I'm not so sure there will be, but let's just say, for the sake of argument, there is a diplomatic solution. Possession is 9/10 of the law, brother. The Russians are likely to only get what they've already taken. That would be my bet. If I were betting they said a diplomatic solution is going to be finished tomorrow, I'd say Russians are probably only going to get what they already got, which is a problem for the Russians. Which now, that being a problem for the Russian, it segues us right into the next reason that I can argue that they can't get a deal. And here's why. Because you're dealing with friggin' Nazis. Because the United States, in the same way that the US and the West created the Berlin Nazi regime in the 1930s to throw it at the USSR, and they couldn't control it. The same thing happens now. They've created a Nazi regime in Kiev, and they're not going to be able to control it. And even when they want to deal, they're not going to. The Nazis don't cooperate. They do not play it well with others in the sandbox, ladies and gentlemen. So once you get to the point with the Nazis where you say, look, they are no longer beneficial to us. We got other fish to fry. So we want to, okay, Nazis, go ahead, turn this game off. We're moving on. The Nazis are going to say, I don't think you understand. We're true believers. And we ain't walking away. We'll fight to the bitter end, even if we've got to fight with, sticks and stones. That's what you got. Sorry, you were very successful in creating a Nazi regime, and Nazi regimes they're not compliant. They do not say yes when you ask them to say yes. They are, what's the term I've used before? The zealotry of the converts. You converted them to believe something, and now they're zealous about what they believe, and they're not going to. They won't even cooperate with you when you want them to cooperate with you. That being said, they also have the Europeans there who are as every bit as emotionally and politically and economically invested in the Ukraine conflict as the Kiev government. So you've got the Kiev government saying, we're true believers, we're not going to back off and stop fighting the Russians. And you got their backers, the MI6 triumvirate, right? The MI6 group led faction saying, we got financially, we got politically, everything. Our neck is stuck completely out on this. We can't just walk away or we get crushed politically. We can't afford to do that. So you've got that whole faction there that it's existential. It's politically existential to the Europeans, and it's actually existential to the people in the Kiev government, because the likelihood is if they try to make a deal, they could be they could face violence. Not could, they almost certainly will face violence. If they try to make a deal, they'll be run out of the country or killed by the far right. And I add this, and I think MI6 is behind this, to be quite frank. One of the things, whether you know it about not, that's going on right now is that the what is it? The Azov, quote, battalion, right? That of course started off as soccer hooligans, and then it grew into, a brigade, or, a platoon, whatever, a battalion, and now it's, going to be, I think they're turning, it's growing. It's a division, whatever. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger and stronger and stronger and stronger. I believe that MI6 is behind that. Remember, MI6, these are the ones that control the Kiev government, not the U.S. Remember this division of labor, that what's going on, the Ukraine project is a division of labor. You got the MI6 contingent, they put together the government, they created Zelensky and his whole aura about, who he and what he is. They created him, they put the government together, they handle the political side. The United States, their part in this game was the military side, to handle the military stuff. They've been real good with it, but to continue to send military hardware to take the lead on that. The French Foreign Legion, that's their history, mercenaries, to continue to bring a lot of, like you probably know, a lot of Frenchmen have been killed in Ukraine. Why? Because they're leading the charge with mercenaries. So if you understand that division of labor for this project, that means that MI6, that the UK have control over the government, they have control over the politics, and so the US, while it may have a lot of power, it doesn't have actual control over the politics. And clearly, MI6 is growing the power, intentionally building the power for the Azov battalion, because that's who they see as the power brokers that can maintain this thing going in the direction that they want. They don't want it to end. These are the people that are telling the MPs in the Rada, the Ukrainian Rada. These are the people that are telling Zelensky and his inner circle, if you do anything that we don't like, we'll just kill you and overthrow the government. So I think what MI6 has is this. It's clear. If Zelensky and or anybody in his crew decides to take the US's advice and make a deal, now that the Azov battalion has grown huge and powerful, the setup is Azov comes in, rubs them out, overthrows the government. What happens then? It's already set. The reason that I think that MI6 was behind the firing of General Sirski. What happened with General Sirski, a guy who's known as a Banderite? He's has been seen. I saw a picture of him with a bracelet on, and it had a swastika on it. He is a friggin' Nazi. And what happened to him when he got fired? He got fired, and he became the ambassador to England, and he went straight to London. He's an MI6 operative. And he's a lady in waiting, shall we say, right? So what happens? If Zelensky screws up and says, okay, I'm going along with the US, if Zelensky doesn't go along with the game, boom, they pop Zelensky, he's done. Anybody around him, boom, they're done. They grab Sirski, they bring him back into Kiev. Now Sirski's in charge. You got a Banderite in charge, and they've already got the Azov battalion built up to a division level. I think it's, 5,000-6,000 or something now. A couple divisions, whatever. So they built up the Azov battalion. If you read, that's been growing. There's the reason it's been growing is they're prepped to replace Zelensky, if need be, with pure Azov people and keep this thing going. You get Sirski, and Sirski's a guy. At some point, I think they're not going to put Sirski in unless they need to. If something goes bad, they also know this. The Americans may decide to pop Zelensky, right? The Americans may decide, Zelensky's a problem. They know that Trump that hates Zelensky, so they know that Zelensky, hey man, they're all gangsters here, right? No honor amongst thieves, and Zelensky's got it all different ways. The MI6 may say we're ready to put Sirski in, and Zelensky's in the way, so Zelensky gets it. The Americans may say, hey, you know what, Zelensky ain't working with us, and we got somebody we want to put in position to work with us. Zelensky gets it. Azov might look up at it and say, you know what, Zelensky's a bit of a liability. He knows too much, and he's working with the Americans too much. Zelensky gets it. Zelensky is a guy who's in a position that a lot of people want him out. Who doesn't want him out? The Russians. The Russians don't want Zelensky out because Zelensky is so stupid and incompetent. As the Iranians say, thank God for making my enemies fools. You can't have a bigger fool than Zelensky. So I think that the Russians, if anything, look, if you want him safe, you put a Spetsnaz contingent in there. They'll protect Zelensky's life, because the Russians don't want him dead, because he's very valuable to the Russians because of the level of incompetence that he has. He's an idiot. He doesn't know what to say. But again, I'll say this. He's an irritant, and he aggravates the Trump people. He doesn't know how to act in an intellectual or diplomatic way. He doesn't know what to do. So at some point he could get it. But if he does, MI6 is ready to slip Sirski right in there. In the same way that when Joe Biden went down, and when Joe Biden had to go, and Obama and the other people, they had other names that they wanted in, but before they could do it, bam, he slipped Kamala Harris in just to spite him, and they couldn't get her out, get her out. In the same way, MI6 is sitting there saying, any way that they've already got their plan together, any way that something happens to Zelensky, boom, they're going to get Sirski right in immediately before the Americans have a chance to get their guy or girl, whoever it, before anybody else has a chance to move. Sirski's going to be announced as the new person in charge, because they want a Banderite there, and that's why they built these gigantic Banderite forces, to keep things in line in that country, to keep it, because let's face it, the truth about it is this. Ukraine's nothing but a big detention camp. It's a gigantic detention camp. The people in Ukraine, if you try to leave, they're guarding the borders. They aren't guarding the borders to stop people from coming in. They're guarding the borders to keep people from going out. People are trying to escape because they don't want to be thrown into the meat grinder, and so they're guarding the borders. I believe that probably Azov and probably is guarding the borders, and you'll see them guarding the borders more because they're trying to keep the meat from leaving. They need more meat for the meat grinder, and the meat's trying to get the hell out of there. People are trying to escape that detention camp so they won't be thrown to their deaths on the front line. Azov's the ones that keep them doing that because they're the true believers. So at some point, I do believe at some point, the MI6 wants Sirski, and at some point they may get him. Now, the weakness of here's the thing of the three factions: the MI6 UK Kiev faction, the Russian faction, the Trump faction. The weakest of them is the Trump faction. Why is that? Because the Russians are unified. They know what they want. And the Russians got support. They got BRICS behind them. They got China behind them. They got Africa behind them. They got a lot of the Russians have really good relationships with the Gulf states, right? They got a lot of friends. The Russians got a lot of friends around the world, big, powerful friends around the world. So the Russians have a lot of support. They got, one of the things that Lavrov did as soon as the special missile military operation started, one of the things that Lavrov did was he went around the world and he was on this whirlwind tour, shaking hands with everybody. He knew that in the long term that they were going to need solid diplomatic support. And I think part of it was the Russians see this thing going to the UN at some point, and they want that diplomatic support. So at some point, when and if some kind of deal goes to the UN, they want to have the people behind it to vote their way, and they want to be able to drum up votes that they need in the UN if it gets there at some point. So I think that from the very beginning, they've been doing that, but they've got solid support. You've got Putin and Lavrov, who are very much supported by the people on the ground in Russia. I do think there's still some oligarchs, some powerful military people that Putin has to contend with that are probably a pain in the neck in Russia. There are some people who are saying, wow, if we were to open things up with the Americans, we could make a fortune again doing that. So he's got some oligarchs that he has to deal with. Let's not be naive about that. So while in fact, President Putin and Lavrov have a very, very powerful base of support in Russia, they got some issues that are a bit of a pain in the neck because you got some oligarchs you got to deal with who are actually very, very powerful. So, but right now, I think Putin can make the decisions that he wants to make. Of course, there's unity, as we talked about, in the MI6 contingent. Now, Trump's got problems, and here's why. Number one, he is of the three factions. To some extent, you can make an argument that his is the weakest and the strongest. He's the strongest because he's a president of the United States, and the U.S. is the empire. And he's got people on the ground, voters and stuff like that support him, both in the U.S. and the U.K., and actually in Russia. People on the ground that want this. The masses always want wars to end. The masses of working class people always want to end wars because they're the ones that got to go to the meat grinder. So Trump's got the masses behind him, but he doesn't have the DC blob. He's at war with the blob, right? So, and he's got, enemies and spies in his own camp. Kellogg, Rubio. Yeah, of course, people are like, well, he doesn't send Rubio anywhere. Why? Because Rubio's his enemy. My understanding is, look, Rubio got a unanimous vote in the Senate for confirmation. That tells you all you need to know, that he's the machine. And Trump brought him in there. My understanding is, here's what I heard, that he was, Marianne Adelson said, I want Rubio. And Trump said, okay, I'll give you Rubio. Okay. So it's like, I'll give you Rubio, but that don't mean I'm going to use him as Secretary of State. He is in charge of the State Department more as a bureaucrat. They've got him. We're going to close this part of the State Department. We're going to open that part of the State Department. He's more a bureaucratic leader of the State Department. Whereas the Secretary of State usually is the lead diplomat for the country. Witkoff is the lead diplomat for the country, not Rubio. So Rubio, he knew Trump made deals with the system to bring in Rubio, but he don't trust Rubio as far as I can throw the house that I'm in right now, right? My pickup truck that I did the pickup truck chronicles out of, that as far as I can throw that pickup truck, that's how far Trump trusts Rubio. Okay, none at all. But he's got him there, but he uses Witkoff. Again, that's a weakness, really, because it's a weakness in a way, because when Witkoff comes back with something, then that's another guy, Rubio, that's going to try to, knife it. It is going to try to stop it. So Trump has the strengths and weaknesses, but so all of them have their strengths and weaknesses. All of them have their strengths and weaknesses, right? But Trump has his. You gotta know that he's got spies and enemies in the camp, and it's no easy task for Trump to do anything. A lot of people say Trump should do this, Trump should do that. He should just say this. He should just say that. I don't think it's that easy for Trump. I think there are people around him saying, you better not do this. You can't do this. They'll come after you if you try to do this. They'll impeach you if you do this. They'll attack you. They'll kill you, whatever the case may be. He's got to deal with that. Let's face it, every couple of weeks, there's another Ukrainian connected guy trying to put a bullet in Trump. Don't think that ain't going to be in the back of your mind, right? Because they want to put a bullet in the back of your head. That's a reality Trump has to think about. So that's where Trump is. Also, Trump's got big problems. And in a way that benefits the other people, because he can't focus on Ukraine. Because right now he's lost a trade war with China. Let's face it, the U.S. went after Russia with an economic war and lost it. And they went after China with an economic war. Real bad move. I also think this, and I've heard this said, and I don't know if you've heard these rumors. With Trump, it kind of really was an economic war. And what happened is when he went after China, the neocons grabbed that and said, this is great. We can use these, we can commandeer these tariffs on China to completely decouple with China and attack China and what have you. And so I'm not saying Trump was for it or against it. I'm just saying the neocons saw that as an opportunity to jump. And so now the neocons are like, well, we don't give a crap what happens with the U.S. economy. Who gives a crap if the shelves are bare? If we go into a depression, we don't care. You saw what we did to Nord Stream. We blew Nord Stream. And we didn't care if it was going to destroy the lives of the working class in Germany and Europe. We just wanted to stop. This was about geostrategic advantage. And they're the same at home. We don't give a crap. The Americans are like, hey, it'll destroy our economy and we'll go into a depression. And the neocons are like, yeah, excuse me. Do you think we really care about that? No, we're for decoupling with China. Maybe they want to go to war with China, and that's why they're decoupling. Maybe they really believe that they can decouple with China and destroy China's economy, whatever. The neocons are all for that. This decoupling with China stuff and going after and hurting China, right? So Trump has to deal with that. He needs to get the hell out of that. Trump needs to back the hell off of it. He's got heat coming in all directions. He's got people saying, you know what? Our dollar's going down, brother. We ain't going to be the reserve currency because of this. And Trump's got to think about that. Does he want to be the one that killed the dollar as a reserve currency? And you know what happens if it dies as a reserve currency? It's just making it happen faster. This is making it happen faster. I think additionally, they didn't think that the Chinese would punch back as hard as they are. And so they thought, yes, they misjudged their hand. You know, Trump talked about the cards in your hand. They misplayed their cards. They said, we got China and we're going to do this. And China needs that market and China will buckle under. And what China did was something that completely and totally was unforeseen. This was it. Look, and this is my thought on it. Could be wrong, but take it for what it is. I think if I were Chinese, this is the way I would look at it. I might have said this on another channel. I don't know, whatever. I'm just saying this is connected to all of this. If I were the Chinese, I would look at it and say, you know, you've been saying for a while that you're planning on a kinetic war with me. You've been saying for a while, we're going to go to war with the Chinese in 2027. We've got 2028, 2029. We've got to go with a war with China before 2030. We've got to go to war with them soon. We've in the what is it, Thucydides trap or something, whatever the hell, which means when there's another power rising and the old power is losing, then they too have to go to war. They just use that as an excuse because they want to go to war. So they're like, look, we can't beat China any other way. We need to go to war with China. And meanwhile, what are you doing? Oh, we're arming. We're setting up the Philippines, Japan, and South Korea to be the next Ukraines. So we're going. What are we going to do? We're going to set them all up to fight China and get blasted to hell. Taiwan, you're going to get flattened. Ukraine, you're going to get. Philippines destroyed. Japan crushed. South Korea nuked. All you are going to get totally screwed. But we're going to do that so we can take China out and weaken China and hurt China. That's the game plan, right? Well, I mean, you've been telegraphing that to China. If I'm China, I'm looking for an opportunity to address that. If you're going to fight me, I want you to be weaker. I want to not just dissuade you, I want to kneecap you, right? I want to do everything I can to kneecap you. Yes. Could I take an economic hit now? But if I got to fight, if you're telling me you want to go to war with me, I'm going to say, yeah, I could take an economic hit now because it would be easier than taking the kinetic and military hit later. And if I got to take a kinetic and military hit, I want you hurting, brother. I want you hurting bad. So the way I see it is, this gave China the opportunity to do what they already knew they needed to do, and that was to kneecap the hell out of the United States. If you're going to fight me, I want you weak. So what does the China say? How can I make you weaker? If you want to fight me by 2027, you're going to be limping when you get here. You're going to be with one foot in the grave and the other on a patch of ice when you come to fight me. I want you to be weak, and I mean weak when we fight. So what happens? We take our punch at China. We're decoupling from you. What does China say? Okay, how can I make you weak? Number one, economically, I want you to hurt bad. So China says, we buy a lot of beef from you, and no more. We'll buy it elsewhere. Ooh, we buy a lot of soybeans from you. No more. We'll buy them elsewhere. All these other things we can get elsewhere. We buy a gas from you, LNG. We buy oil from you. We'll buy it elsewhere. We'll start outsourcing everything away from you. Why? Number one, if you're going to war against us, if your plan is to go to war against us, we'll be crippled if we need those things from you and we can't get them, right? So we got to outsource to someone else. Number two, those things that we're buying from you, you use that money to build up your war machine against us. Sorry, we ain't going to fund the war against us. Last but not least, we, China, in this particular scenario, in this analogy, we are providing the magnets and the rare earth minerals and all the things you need to build missiles and planes and all of that stuff. But what the hell are you going to do with those missiles and planes? Oh, that's right. You want to go to war with us. We're cutting all that crap off. So if you're going to go to war with us, we're going to cripple your economy as best we can. Yeah, is our economy going to take a hit? Certainly. But you're planning to go to war with us. We got a plan for that. We have to prioritize. What do? Well, we want to keep our economy strong for the next couple of years until you attack us. No, I'm planning ahead for the attack. So we're not buying anything from you. That's going to be, we're going to launch our attack on you now, early. We're going to take your legs out from under you as early as we possibly can in the most devastating way we can. Number one, we're buying anything from you economically, you're going to be in pain, real deep pain, right? It would be a little too obvious for us to sell all of your treasuries right now, but we're going to wait. We're going to start quietly unloading, doing things behind the scene economically to kneecap you. But okay. Number two, we're going to hit your military industrial complex. How? Well, last time I checked, Boeing is either the biggest or one of the biggest military industrial complex. We're going to knock the hell out of Boeing. We're going to punch them right square in the snoot, right? How? We're going to stop selling Boeing anything they need for military. That's what they're doing. We're not selling you the electronics you need. We're not selling you the things that you need to build planes that you get from us. We're cutting all that off. Why? We're going to weaken Boeing. We're not going to sell Boeing the things they need to build an FA-18 Hornet and all the other things that they build and all of the parts that they build to keep all of their stuff flying. We ain't selling them that stuff if they're threatening to use it to attack us. Sorry, we got to cripple Boeing. So they're crippling Boeing as best they can. This is not, people see it as they're crippling Boeing because they're going to make planes and they want to sell planes, right? That's an added benefit. That's an added economic benefit. But the first and most important thing that they're doing is they're just taking out Boeing because Boeing is building planes and things to fight them. Boeing is an integral part of the U.S. military industrial complex, and the Chinese want to, and I want to weaken your military industrial complex. Next, you got Raytheon, you got all of these other things, right? They need all of these rare earth minerals and all of that stuff to build. I think, doesn't Boeing also build like Apache choppers, some of the choppers and some of the other stuff, right? They need this stuff to build that stuff. They need my stuff to build that stuff to fight me, and they ain't getting it. Okay, so I'm going to, dramatically weaken your military industrial complex and make it harder. Now, keep in mind this part of it. You right now, U.S., are below zero. when it comes to your military industrial complex. The minimal level of things that you need in order just to maintain a military, not to go attack me. The minimum level of things, you're way below that. Why? Because you're giving all of this stuff to Israel. You're fighting the Houthis and you're throwing stuff there all the time. You've been throwing all of this stuff in Ukraine. So your cupboards are bare. You're really, really weak. So you need to build up just to have the minimal number of things you need to fight a war, namely attack me. Much less saying that if the war drags on. You're way below that. So right now, the U.S. needs to build up to have the minimum number of missiles and fighters and bombs and things like bunker busters. They need to build up to a certain level to be there. They're way below there. So no better time if I'm the Chinese to cut your military industrial complex so you can't even build up to your minimal storage level, much less continue to build way above that so that you can fight me and be prepared to continue to build stuff if you fight me to continue on with the war. I don't want any of that. So now I'm going to cripple your military industrial complex. I'm going to cripple your economy as best I can. And I'm going to take a hit. Sure. If I'm Chinese, I consider this the earliest part of the war. I get to throw the first punch. You open the door for that with these tariffs. Now I get to use the tariffs as an excuse to cripple your military industrial complex and cripple your economy as best I can, because you told me you wanted to fight me in a war and I have to begin preparation for that. And this is kind of clandestine preparation. I can't say that I'm preparing for a war. Not only that, if I'm the Chinese, if I can effectively cripple you militarily and economically, you can't attack me. So what happens if I take your legs out from under me and break both your legs? Then you got to be like, damn it, we wanted to fight the Chinese by 2027, but we can't because we got nothing. We don't have any rare earth minerals. We can't build a damn thing, and the Chinese won't sell them to us. That's why here's a prediction I have. I'm the Chinese right now. Here's my prediction. Where we are now is if the U.S. doesn't make some kind of a deal, and Trump's starting to imply, oh yeah, well we're going to get a deal done with China, and we're going to set where things are going to be. And this isn't, and we hear Vicent, whatever the guy's name is, Vicent, has been talking with business and banking leaders saying, look, the tariffs on the Chinese aren't sustainable. He knows because everything's crashing around them. This thing is going to pieces. It's going to be a humiliation for them to get out of it, walk out of it. But at some point, they're going to have to eat it. They should eat it sooner than they eat these tariffs against China sooner rather than later. But here's my point. The Trump team are already starting to send out signals. Hey, the tariffs ain't going to be here forever. And we know we can't do this. And we know we can't launch an economic assault on China because we're losing this one fast. And we didn't know the Chinese were going to punch back like this. The Chinese are throwing haymakers, man. They're throwing hammers at us. So here's my prediction. The one of two things. If I'm the Chinese and you come back to me and you say, we need, let's sit down and get a deal. If I'm the Chinese, I do to you what you're trying to do to Iran. Iranians say, look, if this is about missiles, it's about nukes, it's about nukes. We don't want nukes anyway, so we're willing to swear that. That's an easy one to do. We'll just say we ain't going to get any nukes. And guess what? We'll allow the IEA, EA, whoever the hell to come in and look. The Russians are down. The Chinese are down. We won't get nukes, but don't ask us about the rest of this crap. And the U.S. is like, yes, but you can't have missiles. You can't help any of your partners. You can't do anything but what we tell you to do. And the Iranians are like, yeah, that ain't going to work. So the U.S. is trying to take one little negotiating point, which is nuclear weapons, and expand that into everything and say, we want to negotiate everything you do. If I'm the Chinese, I do that. I do reverse that on you. When the U.S., and I know you're in a jam. I know, Donald Trump, you need a friggin' deal because the cupboards and the shelves are about to be bare. Amazon, Walmart, they're screaming at you saying, dude, we're going to run out of everything. What the hell are we going to do here? How are we going to do this? You've got all of these ma and pa companies saying, oh, what the hell's going on here? We're all going to be out of business, right? So Trump needs a deal. If I'm the Chinese, Trump calls me, we're ready to talk. Okay, sounds like an idea. Let's go. But remember what the Chinese have said. You got to drop the tariffs first. In other words, what they're saying is this. You got to take a loss. You got to acknowledge that you were wrong. You know what I mean? It's like A woman has a fight with her husband or something doesn't work and she puts him out. You're out of here. And he calls her, honey, I want to talk. And she says, but first you have to apologize and acknowledge that you did this and this and this. She sets preconditions. I ain't going to talk to you. He wants her back, but I want to come back. Yeah, okay, you can come back, you idiot. But first you got to do this, this, this. And he goes, okay, I was wrong, blah, 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 blah. He comes back. She lets him in. They make up. Off they go with their lives, right? That's a wonderful love story and everybody's happy, right? Yeah, well, this ain't going to be a wonderful love story. I think the Chinese, number one, have said, in order to even talk to us, you got to humiliate yourself. You got to degrade yourself. You got to crawl back to us and say, I have sinned. Please forgive me. You got, and how do you have to do that? Drop them all. Drop the tariffs. You don't drop the tariffs, we can't talk. Because the Chinese don't really want to talk, in my opinion. They don't really want to stop this. I don't think, look, you keep in mind something. This is not just about economics to the Chinese. This is the important part to think about. The U.S. has said, we are going to attack you. We are going to war with you. And if you're the Chinese, you must act on that as quickly as possible. And now that you have said, I want a deal, the Chinese don't want a deal. As far as they're concerned, the part of the war where they can be most effective has started. And this is maybe a way that they can prevent you from attacking me. I want to take your knees out, and you can't chase me. You can't come after me. You're going to be in a hospital with 2 bandaged knees, right? I mean, from a football perspective, right? I want to hurt you. I want to find this. You're saying I'm going to beat you up. Maybe I want to kick you in the groin and poke you in the eyes, right? I want to go to your weakest point and damage your weakest point so you have to tap out. You can't fight anymore, right? So what happens? Now the Chinese are in a position to do that, to hit our weakest point, which is economic. They hit our weakest point, which is the reliance of what little industrial capacity that we have on China. So what happens? The Chinese put us out. Number one, if Trump drops all of that, which he's going to have to do, the Chinese are like, I ain't doing nothing. In order to negotiate, we're going to have to go to China and say, we're sorry, we have sinned, forgive us. That will be easy for Trump, which means they get to drag this thing out longer. And once Trump does that, here's the other part of it. You lost, and I don't care about win or lose. I got you over the barrel. And now I can pull on you what you're pulling on Iran. Now I can say to you, when you say we need a deal, and I say, drop all the tariffs first. Okay, we'll drop all the tariffs. You got us. We'll drop all the tariffs. We get a deal. You really need a deal, don't you? All right. Now we're talking about everything. We're not just, what do the Russians say? The Russians say, we need a lasting peace. See, they're in the same position with everybody. With the Iranians, you've screwed this thing up so long and so bad, and now you're weak. The Iranians are saying, let's get a deal where you relax the sanctions too. Let's get a deal. Let's deal with this whole thing. We've been beating around the bush too long. What are the Russians saying? We need a comprehensive deal. We need to address the issues that were at the foundation of this. Let's not just put a Band-Aid on this thing. Let's address the foundation of it. I think the Chinese are going to come with the same thing. They're going to say, look, we need a comprehensive deal. It's not just good enough to get an economic deal. We need to talk about this military situation too. We need to talk about Taiwan too. We are ready to talk with you. You got to get the hell out of Taiwan. In order to get a deal, number one, we know that see, here's the thing that I got to say. Don't come to me weak. If you need to deal with me, you better be strong. If you come to me weak and you need to deal with me, I'm taking you to the cleaners because you need a deal. I don't. You want a deal. I will take a deal, but I don't have to have one. So what happens when we drop the sanctions? The reason they want us to drop the sanctions is because when we drop the sanctions, we have officially said, you win, we're weak, we need a deal bad, and we need a deal quick. At that point, the Chinese say, you understand, we can continue with this. You can't, Trump. Politically, you can't. Economically, you can't. You need a deal. So here's what we're going to do. Get the hell out of Taiwan and stay out. What you going to do? Now, Trump can't do that, But he can't not do that because he has to have a deal. And what happened if the Chinese say, look, we're ready to do, in fact, what do you want? Tariffs, 10, 15%? Okay, we'll give you that. We'll do 10 or 15% tariffs. We'll give you 5% or 10%, whatever the tariffs were previously, if they were any, we'll give you 10, 15% above that. So you'll get your tariffs, you'll get your money. And let's face it, the tariffs are not as bad as some people think. They're bad, bad, bad. But there are some areas, for instance, the key thing to think about is this. The tariff on a pair of Nike shoes is not the final price. You pay $100, just as a number. You pay $100 for the shoes. Nike pays 20. So when Nike ships that shoe in at $20, they pay a tariff on $20 for shoes. So if it's 50% as the number, they pay $10 tariffs. You pay $100. So it's not $150. It's a tariff on what they paid for. So they can live, I'll put it like this, Nike can live with the tariffs a little bit more than you can. So some of these companies can live with tariffs a little bit more. Some of them can't. Nike's big and powerful. If you're in a big and powerful company, you can't eat things. Your profit margin may not be what Nike's profit margin is. If your profit margin is 10%, you can't live with 10% tariffs. So the smaller guys are the ones that get crushed. The bigger guys have a bigger profit margin, so they can eat higher tariffs. The little guys can't. It will have the effect. These tariffs will have the same effect, maybe intentionally so, as COVID, where it'll wipe out small businesses and the big businesses will still be able to continue. And might I add, you know what the government's going to do? Tax cuts for these big businesses where they get the difference gets made up in tax cuts, so it doesn't cost them a damn thing anyway. The little guy's going to hurt. But my point is this. What happens if China says, number one, stay the hell out of, and the list of things. Stop pointing missiles at us. Stop doing this. Stop overthrowing governments on our board. Whatever they choose. They say, in order to do that, we got to resolve everything. And we got to resolve this military thing so you don't attack us. So you got to get off of our backs and stop arming Taiwan. How does Trump deal with that? When he needs to deal bad. Number one. Number two, I'm China. Let's say for the sake of argument, we get a deal. Okay, we got a deal, 10, 15% tariffs above or beyond whatever it was. Fair enough, right? And then the U.S. says, oh, okay, so I guess that means you're going to come back now and you're going to buy LNG and stuff from us. You're going to buy soybeans. You're going to buy the things you stopped buying, and you're going to sell us the stuff that we need to bomb the hell out of you. You're going to sell us the rare earth minerals and magnets and things like that. If I'm China, I'm going to say, well, we can talk about that. Number one, no, we're not doing it. We're not buying stuff from you. Sorry. We need a stable supply chain for food and energy, and we've got other people that we can buy it from. So you weren't stable. You determined you weren't stable. So we ain't going back to buying that stuff. Anyway, you can tell your farmers and all your other LNG people and all, have a nice day. We wish them best luck. But we ain't going back to buying that because, we'll do what we're doing. We're not going back to buying from you because you're not a stable seller, and we need stability, number one. Number two, you want us to relax these sanctions on rare earth minerals and stuff like that. You guys got some sanctions on us. You're sanctioning us that we can't buy these chip making things, chips that we need, we can't buy. Huawei is sanctioned. This is sanctioned. That's sanctioned. You know what? We can talk. We can talk. So why don't we do this? We'll be happy to drop those sanctions if you drop yours. You drop all the sanctions on us, we drop the sanctions on you. You don't drop the sanctions on us, we don't drop the sanctions on you. We already know that the neocons will pitch hell and they won't let Trump drop the sanctions. And the Chinese know that too. So the Chinese are going to say, oh, those chip sanctions, the Huawei sanctions, this thing, drop them all and we drop them all. And Trump's going to say, but I can't do that. And the Chinese are going to say, yeah, we know that. That's why we ask. By the way, the offer stands. You drop all your sanctions against us, we drop our sanctions against you. But we already know you can't drop the sanctions against us, which means, guess what? We're not sending you the rare earth minerals. We're not sending you the magnets. We're not buying from Boeing. We're not doing any of that. So you got your deal, and you can buy televisions, and you can buy trinkets and all the things for Walmart. We can go back to doing business. but we're still crippling your military industrial complex, and we're still hurting your economy bad because we ain't buying the stuff from you that we used to buy. And we've already accepted that you ain't buying the stuff from us you used to buy, but you're going to be the one that hurts. And good luck finding these rare earth minerals that you need for your military industrial complex, because we control 95% of them, the refinement of them in the world. So that's what I would do. So I'd do if I was the Chinese. That'd be my game. All right, all 798 of you. Thank you very much. What I'd like you to do, most importantly, is share this on all your social media platforms. I think it was a great little Sunday morning talk. Additionally, and this is critical, additionally, if you can afford it, buy me a coffee is great. You go in there and just buy Garland a coffee. How much? $5, or how many do you want? Whatever, and buy that. It has a little thing that says you want to make this monthly or one time. So if you can afford buy me a coffee, you can become a Patreon member. We got PayPal, all of that stuff, various ways. And of course, if you look now, I got my PO box there. So PO box 32, you see that. If you want to send anything you want to send, with the exception of a mail bomb, but if you want to send some information, a letter, a donation, anything you want to send, there's my PO box. Follow me on Rockfin. Follow me on Rumble. Follow me on Telegram, Facebook, Instagram, you name it. Follow me everywhere. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed chatting with you today. Let me look. Do we have any super chats? Because if I don't see any. I don't see any super chats. All right. No super chats. That's okay. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great afternoon. Oh, there we go. Holy crap, we got a super chat. The super chat is Red Chili Pepper says, you've given us hope that the oligarchs, elites of the U.S. might have your intellectual and intelligent thoughts. Nah. Nah. I doubt that. But thanks a lot. But let's see. China only trades 14%. Somebody says Trump is Q plus. I don't know what that means. You know what I always find interesting? I'll say this before I go. People in the chat, and you guys see this, there are people in the chat that write in all caps. I always wonder about that. People are in the chat and saying, hey, Garland, I think this. Actually, you see some funny stuff. You see some brilliant comments in the chat. But there are certain people in the chat. There's always somebody that writes in all caps, like they're screaming at the chat, like, chat, everybody's got to hear what I have to say. And I'm like, I wonder, it's interesting. There are various psychological profiles, not saying good, bad, or indifferent. They're different people who do things different ways. And I always find it interesting what the psychological profile of is of people who write in all caps in the chat. Why someone feels like everybody in the chat's got to hear me. Yeah, I don't know. But anyway, thanks a lot. Have a great day. And as I said, if you can afford to donate, even if you can't afford to, the important thing is that you share this on all your social media platforms. Oh, by the way, I'm going to be on Galloway today at 20 minutes into the show, I think. I don't know. Yeah, but I'm going to be on George Galloway today. That's always fun. I don't know what the hell I'm going to talk about. Thanks. I'm out.